All right, how we looking? Let's see. Do, 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 do. All right, I think we're live. I think we're good to go. So if you just let me know if you can hear me, see what I'm working on, that would be great. Today, same thing as last week, just kind of working on a quick little design that I've been working on. Project on this one. It's quite a large building. It's a lot larger than things I've shown you in the past. um, what we're looking at is kind of multi-use. It's got 3 different kind of uses in here. The back of the building is going to be used mostly warehouse. Middle of the building is going to be office space, and then front of the building we're looking at retail, going to be used for different tenants. The concept is in a industrial area. So one of the things I've been working on, again, welcome if you're just joining. Project is a multi-use, sort of 3-story, maybe 2-story industrial / office / retail commercial space. It's in a sort of, I guess, industrial area. Nearby, there's some other industrial buildings, a baseball field. So it's not in a residential area. But one of the things I've been dealing with that I'm going to hopefully work on today is the idea that it just feels really large. Hold on a sec. My chat isn't up. Let me get this working real quick. There we go. Awesome. Hey, welcome next door. Good to see you. So one of the things I've been working with is the idea that this building's huge. It's like a 3-story building, and then when you put it next to the other buildings, it's very large. Part of the reason for it being so large is the warehouse space that the client needs. They stack a lot of stuff really high. So the height has to come from that. And then initially the idea was, to save money was to keep it the same size. So, basically build a box, save money on structure and all that. But it doesn't really work for me in terms of this front retail area. And he says retail, but it might end up being office space or, smaller, not really like boutique where people will be walking by and shopping. It's not really in the middle of a city center or anything. So what I was thinking of doing is taking this structure and actually taking this front third and then dropping this down to a 2 height space. So we actually essentially get 2 buildings per se. You get the 3 height space in the back and then a double height space in the front, because this extra height that we end up with on the retail is just kind of unnecessary. Extra costs, extra air conditioning, everything else, that comes along with that. So we're going to just kind of play with this and see from a building form. If you were here last week, we worked on mostly an interior tenant improvement for a salon. This is the opposite end of that. It's early building form, programming, everything from the outside. So first thing, I just kind of want to play with the space here just to orient you guys while you're watching. This side we say 2-story warehouse is actually more like 3 stories at this point. Then we're going to have an office on the first floor and office on the second floor. And then the third floor is going to become an event space that's used for small gatherings, things like that. And then all the front's going to end up being what he's calling retail, but again, not retail in the true sense. So first thing I want to do is just kind of play with this and see if I make this front third, front half, 2-story, what does that feel like? So I'm just going to copy the roof, and then I'm going to bring this roof back to just cover the front or the back half too. And then I'm going to take this roof, I'm going to have this one cover just the retail area. So now I got 2 separate roofs, and then I'm going to take this. Well, first I probably want to make all of these, because what's going to happen, I'm going to lower the roof and these are going to go away. I need to make these based on that lower level. The way Revit works is for certain things like floors, walls, windows, they're based on a certain level that you set up. So for this one is based on the 2nd floor retail. I'm actually going to drop that down to the 2nd floor office level. And it's probably a little too low, so I'm going to say 2nd floor office plus maybe 8 feet just to bring it up a little bit higher. Let's see where that goes. Take this, make this 2nd floor office plus 8 feet. And then same with these. 2nd floor office, 8 feet. These walls probably also. And my stairs are all going to get messed up, but those are things I'll have to fix later once I kind of have an idea of what I want to do here. Okay, so now everything's kind of dropped down. Well, maybe not this one. Okay, so now I'll take this roof and what feels right. And I'm really just looking at the form right now, like the structure and all that. Like I have to visually sort of just pretend it's not there because I have to fix it later. But I'm just looking at the overall massing of it. It still feels a little high between these 2 floors. One of the issues is he also, like we said, it's retail, but it's not quite the same as retail. As he was thinking it'd be good to have large overhead doors, so I don't want to go too far down either. So let's just make this 4 foot. And there are probably easier or cleaner ways to do this. Right now I'm just kind of moving everything. If I was doing it the right way, I would have just moved the level and kind of had everything down there. But sometimes for me, it's just, I don't want to think about it. Take me an extra maybe minute or 2 to just move everything. It gives my brain kind of time to think as I'm doing these sort of mindless movements here. That's also part of the thing that happens in our office is since I do most of the design, I often will hand this off to drafters and their job is to almost clean up my mess, which is okay because I used to be the guy doing the cleaning up the mess. So I'm trying to be cognizant of it and not make too much of a mess. But so it feels a little better in terms of the mass of the building. One of the things with retail too is you got to consider the ceiling heights that people want in certain types of spaces. So we don't want to go too small either, because a lot of times these retail spaces, if they put a ceiling in or they don't put a ceiling in, they want a certain height in there. And the HVAC, the air conditioning ducts that are going to be in here, plus the structure and all that, I mean, you're looking sometimes maybe 3-4 feet from the deck. So you taking that into account that, and then now your ceiling's really low. So we don't want to go too far down either. So it feels a little better considering it used to be like this side here in terms of the size and the scale of everything. And there's something that we often refer to. Maybe you've heard it in architecture school or other people talk about it, just like the human scale of it. Think about the size of this door, and a person. In fact, let's just put a person there, and you kind of look at it from, what does it feel like if a person was standing there? And if you're that person, how large does it feel when you have things like something that's supposed to be super grand or very large, like something that's supposed to be impressive, churches, things like that. Sometimes you want to take human scale and multiply it by a number of times so that it feels larger than a regular space. If you have a space that's, something that somebody's going to want to feel more cozy and comfortable, you bring it down a bit. So size of the person, you kind of get a sense of how big this building is. And this is all a mess back here. The last meeting I had with this client, we just kept moving things around and trying different things out. And so this is one of those messes that I've left behind that I still have to clean up. This event space needs glass and all that, and I just kind of left it until I figured this part out. Yeah, I do kind of like this sort of floating structure above. It reminds me of the, where is that? Chicago, where they have that sort of exterior structure and then the building's kind of inside there. Not going to do that here because there's cost implications that my client wants to account for, which this would be a little more expensive than just your traditional. And, that's actually another interesting discussion is, a lot of times when you're designing something, even if it makes sense to you that it wouldn't be super difficult to do, you got to find the right contractor who could build it or is actually willing to build it and willing to sort of figure it out. Because if it's not the standard stuff they've always done, sometimes they tend to either charge more or, not just put a factor of safety on there because they've never done it before. So they're going to want to price it accordingly, not lose their money doing it either. So we don't want to, do anything that's so extreme because we don't have investors and donors. This is a couple that's building this building, and yes, they're super lucky to have the money to be able to do this, but they're also not super rich either. So what I'm doing here is each one of these sort of columns and beams is what we call a pre-engineered metal building. Comes from the factory, so all as one piece delivered to the site or as a couple pieces. And right now I have it as the standard height for what this building was. So I'm just kind of modifying this one by duplicating it. And I'm going to change the height to match the new height of this building here. And we're just going to keep doing this until we get it right. Close. And we're at in the phase wise, we're at what we call schematic design phase. So it's not exactly right, but I'm just trying to get the general concept of what it's going to be, because at some point this transitions to what we call construction documents, which is going to be the builder set, right? It's going to be what you get your permit off of. It's going to be everything detailed, everything completely done. But we don't want to get to that point until we generally know what the design is going to be. Otherwise, you'd spend all your time designing it and then end up having to come back and redesign it anyways. Cost overruns will be very impactful. Yeah, always. That's the funny thing that, not funny, but the thing that they don't really teach you in architecture school is that, this is the real side of architecture is if I had a client with no budget, this would be totally different. But, I start out getting a project from somebody that they have to fit within the budget. And if I can't fit it within the budget, the building doesn't get built. So what point do I make sacrifices to certain things that I think would be really cool in an effort to get the project done? This is all stuff I'm going to fix in a little bit, but what'll end up happening if I split these two roofs is obviously I did it for the aesthetic purposes, but there are other implications that come with it. This structure now is different from this structure. When I say structure, I mean like the columns and beams and all that. And it just makes it so if every single one of these columns and beams was exactly the same, it just helps with the speed of construction. You come in and you mark them and nothing's different. There's no chance of mixing up one beam versus the other because they're the same. That's not a huge deal on this. I don't think that, these being shorter would be something that's not doable. But now what it does is this section of wall, I now have to add exterior panel with waterproofing and all that here. Whereas before it was just one big wall and I only had really, kind of 4 exterior walls that we had to deal with. This introduced a small portion of exterior wall that adds some waterproofing issues, things like that, that we just have to contend with in detail later. These are the sort of choices that we have to make. Is that worth it to make it feel a little better? Is it worth it to add that sort of exterior cladding, waterproofing, points of possible failure and all that? Is it worth taking that risk for the look? And in this point, I think it is, because that's not a huge risk. It's not something we really have to contend with. So I'm starting to like the split a little bit. One thing that I think, and this sort of like, I was thinking in the back of my head about this, but now that I see it, it definitely is going to be a nice feature, is when I start working at this event space upstairs, there was only light coming from one end or the other in this very sort of long, deep space. But by splitting the roof, now that gives me the opportunity to add some skylight window or clerestory windows up high, which will help bring some more daylight back into the space. So I think with all those benefits, I'm probably going to recommend we do this break in the building and allow the daylight to get in, allow the front space to get a little bit lower. I think overall it's worth any potential change that might cause. One thing you also see on here is like all my materials are just boring and ugly. Like this is never the final product that you'll see. But when we're early design, I don't want to spend too much time on making the materials look right. You notice there's not a ton of entourage. I needed to know how big the car and the human might look, so I add those. But other than that, I'm just kind of getting the form correct. And in reality, a lot of times you could change the display in Enscape to just a white box. And a lot of times that's actually useful. I like to use this sometimes when I get certain clients that are, pretty particular about finishes. And if I show them the basic one, the one with the renderings with the materials that aren't correct, instead of talking about the form of the building, they'll just talk about why is it white and brown? I don't want white and brown. So sometimes this is good to turn it on to white or polystyrol to just talk about the form and the elements of the building as opposed to the actual colors. But since I'm working on this on my own and I'm not doing this with a client, I'm going to just do the regular one because it helps me see it better. One thing that does kind of look cool sometimes is you can just make it look like a sketch. I don't really care for this, honestly, because I also do sketch. I'd rather just sketch it myself. Or, trick of the trade, you just print it and trace over it and sketch it. And then there's watercolor. This to me, I don't know, feels too SketchUp-y. I have this, I might as well work on this. Dig the sunlight opportunity. It does make the building look less generic. Yeah, agreed. Right now it's kind of, the buildings that are right next to it are pretty generic as well. Everything around it is generic. And we're also not trying to stand out too much with this, but there needs to be some character that gets added to this so that it's not just, to be honest, anybody could have designed just a big box. That's essentially what this is. So I'm trying to add a little bit of character to it that doesn't cost the client a ton of money. That is way too skinny of a walkway. I just noticed that. I'm gonna have to work on that. There's no way you could open that door and walk out. I think what happened when I was moving things around is that wall got pushed out too far. Okay, so in general, I'm liking the form. I'm gonna start cleaning up some of these other elements here because I really want to focus on this event space up above. So let's see what we got to do here. So I'm going to want this to overhang just a bit. And then I'm actually going to cut this short because this is an interior wall in Revit. I want it to be an exterior wall, but I only want it to be exterior from this roof on up. So I'm going to edit the profile. And again, with everything, I don't know if this is the right way to do it. This is the way I've done it for 20 years. So if there's any Revit experts watching, I apologize. We're going to go exterior. I never set up exterior. So here's one problem that I have to fix personally is when I start the project, a lot of times I don't know how the walls are going to be made. Because in Revit, you set up, what the construction of it is, what the structure is made out of. And when I'm designing, I just said generic 8-inch because I didn't really get around to doing it the right way. So right now, everything still just says generic 8-inch. I'm actually just going to leave that way for now because it would take way too much time for me to fix that right now. And I'll just have to do that in post after this is done. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to draw the generic wall, which I know is going to be the exterior wall. I just don't know what it is yet. And then align it here. And then you just tell Revit, attach it to this here, and it cuts it. But if I attach it to this one, it doesn't really work that well. So I just do edit profile. Would you rather extrude the walkway to create the hanging cantilever or shift some elements so the width can be wider? Good question. A couple of things that I have on this particular project that are something I'm kind of contending with is this project came to me after they've already put the site plan together. And what was given to me was rough, or not even rough, like fixed exterior dimensions. So I can't go beyond this footprint. It won't work site-wise, parking, driving, fire, access, all that. So I'm definitely limited to this. So something has to go in. This could overhang, just on the second floor. Take this and kind of spread it out, which would be kind of cool. But the issue on this particular project is that like right up on the building is where the civil engineer has the fire lane, and the fire trucks need a certain clear height. So if I kind of stick out into that, I think it's going to go over that fire lane. So really when I started this, I just kind of gave myself the rule like, okay, this is my footprint. I can't go beyond that. Everything has to kind of happen inside of that footprint. But yeah, I think that'd be a cool opportunity if we could to kind of bring this out. That would help give some layering and depth to the facade, which would help break it up so it's not so plain Jane too. But unfortunately not in this case. I mean, the other option, which I would love to do, is go back and tell the civil engineer this isn't right, needs to be redone. But unfortunately, he doesn't work for me on this one. Part of, real world too, architecture is working together with everybody and, coming to consensus on things. And, sorry, I'm just thinking there's a weird door there. Coming to consensus on things and working together. And so typically, usually it's nice when The civil engineers underneath me, the structural engineer, the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineer, they're all underneath me. And so we kind of all will have what we call design meetings where we just kind of sit together and go through the model. I say, this might be an issue. What can you do about it? Or they say, hey, I got a beam going here. How do we work around it? So that's the best way to do it, is sort of in that collaborative sense. But sometimes like this one, you'll get projects where I was actually like the third architect they talked to on this one. So I kind of am coming in late to the game on it. They were unhappy with the first two that they kind of talked to and worked with. And then they got my name as a recommendation. So they came to me. But by that point, a lot of the work had already been done by the civil engineer. And they're already in for site plan permittal. And, you don't want to slow that process down by saying, hey, you need to redesign the site plan. So on this one, it's sort of start from the outside, work in. That's going to make everybody's life easier. And if I'm a good enough architect, I can probably, figure it out and work with it. Like I said, this stair is obviously off. So here's an issue that I was just noticing while I was talking about that. Right now we have an elevator. So you kind of come into like a little lobby, get in the elevator, and then it's kind of weird, right? Because we go to the second floor of the retail, which is at a different height than the second floor of the office. So that's going to be one stop to that. And then you go to the office side and there's, that's weird. Oh, that's just one of them. Okay. Oh, that was the retail that got moved with it. So anyway, this floor, when I fix it, will be up here. So you end up with 3 floors here, 2 floors here. And so your elevator now has a ton of stops, which can be done. It's not unheard of. But is that the best way to go about it? I'm not quite sure. The other thing I need to think about is that by code, every floor needs, considering their use, is going to need 2 exits. So I'll handle the exits for the retail with sort of this exterior walkway. We could put the stairs on either end. But by adding it to the office space is going to take up interior office space because you can't get through this floor to this level. Could add a ramp, but that's going to be a really long ramp. So let me think about that for a minute. Because I was thinking if you come into the office, you got 1 stair up, but then this needs to be in its own separate corridor, because the 3 floors might be used at different times by different people. So what that means is end up with a wall. I wonder if I want a straight shot stair or L-shape it. And again, if you've watched last week's live or even this one, and you'll see I don't really know what I'm doing half the time, and that's the thing about architecture is I don't know what the answer is. All I can do is kind of play with it and figure it out. So that's why this is interesting to me that a number of you are here watching this live, and I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing half the time. So this is the retail. Let's fix this so that we only have the floor in the retail space, and then we'll need another floor in the office. This is the office. It's the retail. If you guys caught, play with it and figure it out. Oh yeah, yep. That's pretty much what this is all about. If you guys watched last week's live, you remember we were working on a salon space. Had the meeting with the client this morning, actually, and kind of went through, and it had changed quite a bit, just sort of the discussions afterwards in terms of the layout of the chairs and things like that. So, but she was happy with everything that we kind of did to that point. So I think it worked out really well what we did last time. So now it's just kind of more tweaking. Okay, so now I got 3 floors. I'm just going to delete these windows for now because they keep confusing me. 3 floors for the office, corridor, stair, and that stair is going to have to repeat onto the second floor. Paste, same place. Nope, paste, current view. Okay, so now we got a second floor stair. So, nope, wrong floor. Second floor office. Okay, there you go. Okay. So now we got, you come in, you go up, you're on the second floor, you go up again, you're on the third floor. So we have stairs. Another satisfied client on site. Yep, really good to hear. Thank you. Yeah, that's what architecture is all about, right? Is making sure your clients happy, get what they need. Detach from here. Okay, so now I got this corridor wall. Oh, first off, that's way too close. So we need 5 foot of landing for each stair minimum. So now we have this funky corridor coming up. So let's see. We walk in. Oh, need a door. I'm just going to put this door here for now. So you walk in. Door. Stairs. There's no floor. Second floor. It's just weird. I have so many stairs. It's a lot of space taken up by the corridor or by the stairs up. Okay, let's come back to that because I want to see. I really wanted to look at this event space for the most part. One sec, I got to look at this document real quick. So what I'm looking for is the client provided me a list of sort of what their expectations of the spaces were, just to kind of give me a starting point of what they're hoping for. And I need to just make sure it's something I can show. I like having you guys here kind of while I think through this, think out loud, but there is some sort of discretion I need to have, being that this is a real project with a real owner. Okay, I think this is okay to show. Okay. Since it's more of a multi-purpose building, I think the stairs look enough so everyone doesn't clutter into one single vertical. Yeah, I think that's part of the issues I have with this is it's just so many different uses all in one space. It does make sense. I have to kind of separate them out because the other thing to consider is that they're also going to be using the space possibly at different hours. The retail might be one time, the warehouse might be another, and then the event space might be a whole different one. So this is what's interesting. And this is, conversation I've had before, but I probably want to have again about the use of AI in architecture. Because this was provided to me by the client, which is amazing, in terms of it helps me understand what their vision is. they acknowledge, they know, and we kind of discussed it, is that this isn't realistic to what the space is, but it kind of gives me an idea of what they're looking for. This has like a list of spaces with potentially like the size of them, general orientation, but there's some things that I don't think work for our particular spot. First off, the northeast, southwest are completely wrong for our building. Ours isn't oriented that way, but that's not a big deal. We could work with that. But they also have the guest entrances coming on the long side, which in this space, the long side has a warehouse on one side and retail on the other. Now I could add a corridor here and take away the retail space if that's what they wanted. But after talking with them and meeting with them, I don't think that's what they wanted. They did concede what they're really looking for is one large sort of open space. They want to have a pre-function sort of separate area that could serve as like a green room or a lounge area. And then what we call the back of house. Back of house would be storage for AV and gear. The one thing we did also discuss is the storage for tables and chairs. They plan on using the warehouse for that. So we don't have to save room just for that. A little green room. So if you have an act coming up, and this is a 16 by 20 small stage. So it's not like they're doing like huge concerts, but it's a nice size stage area. Some more storage, and then a small little catering kitchen. Catering kitchen essentially means they're not going to be doing cooking in the space. They're going to have caterers come in, so they're going to do some prep. They have to have a place to lay things out. And then like for warming, for like microwaves, anything like that, so that they can get it ready and prepared. But it doesn't need to be a full service kitchen. And then the freight elevator, they want to be able to connect to the warehouse side, since that's where they're going to be doing the tables and chairs. They had mentioned kind of like briefly this kind of coat storage is just floating. They didn't intend necessarily for that. It is kind of nice if you come in and there's a bit of a buffer and you know where to put your stuff and you don't walk right into the space, but that wasn't like a hard has to have thing. So I'm going to take this and just sort of start blocking in how I think this might lay out with our sort of space that we're working with. And that's why I kind of wanted to figure out maybe where the stairs might be, because that might dictate some of this here. So first is they want a freight elevator. And it has to be on the warehouse side. So I'm going to take the elevator, and they didn't say whether they wanted the freight elevator in this space or in the warehouse space, but the warehouse has a lot more space than the event does. So I'm just going to put it on the warehouse side. Since we have freight elevator on one side, this now to me sort of becomes back of house area. I guess not view, but I guess the connection is from a site plan standpoint is they also own one of these buildings up here. So most of the people will be coming from this side. So I don't think I want the back of house on the north side, because that's going to take away sort of the views and all that. One other interesting thing they had mentioned that is not shown on here is they wanted an outdoor balcony, which is, not within this. So outdoor balcony is also going to be probably on that side. So let's just say that's the balcony. And right now we're just space planning. We're just grabbing blocks and just kind of throwing everything together and see what fits. There's no bathrooms here either. We're going to want bathrooms. Okay. So, because I'm thinking through like back of house spaces. Bathrooms is like the first thing that comes to mind. So I'm just going to throw a couple of single users. For just space planning purposes, single users. I just started 8 by 8. So we got, let's just say 2 bathrooms right now. It might end up having to be more. I'll figure that out later. I just want to get a sense of how much are we talking? How much space are we talking? And then maybe say this, that becomes the catering kitchen maybe. Trying to keep all the plumbing sort of in one general area, so we're not running a ton of lines. The other thing they were saying in this space is they want the open ceiling, which is good. It's good for this one. It's going to suck for acoustics, so it's one thing I have to talk to them about if they have an open ceiling. But with the open ceiling means also any plumbing lines are generally going to be run overhead, which means you're going to see them. So the more I can keep the plumbing line sort of in one general area, the less we have a ton of just pipes running through the ceiling. What else do we got? Freight elevator, catering kitchen, bathroom. So we need a green room and a ton more storage. Let's say green room, storage. We have to have access to the elevator. Green room here. And I'm trying to kind of save this space for the main event area. And this would be kind of cool too. If this is the main space, we already have sort of an inset. Sorry, my voice is going today. We already have an inset for the stair. If I build a wall out here, then that kind of creates a natural alcove in the space, which is maybe where this pre-function lounge bar could be. So I'm kind of liking this sort of like mirroring this on both sides to create that sort of alcove directly across from the main stage. Coat storage. So coat storage should really be from the main entrance, one of the first things you see when you walk in. But I don't want to block the view because this is going to end up being probably all glass. I don't want to block the view. And they're going to come in, and maybe there's a door here. So maybe it just ends up coming down here. Oops. I realized after the last live stream that in OBS, when they say capture window, I always turn off show cursor. So I turned it back on this time. Hopefully you can see what I put, because last time I was like, oh, over here, and then there was no cursor because I had turned it off. So when I'm pointing at something, hopefully now you know what I'm pointing at. Coat storage. So you walk in, you see some activity outside. Maybe this is like the pre-function area. It'd be kind of nice, you know. Sometimes when I go to like different charity events and things like that, they have like the kind of hangout before the actual event, so that you know you kind of have a little bistro tables, you hang out and chit chat before the main event. So maybe there's a good spot when you first come in, so that way you know where it is. Could it be a double door since folks have been moving to and fro? You mean from the stair? Yeah, and in fact, that's probably a good idea. Not just a double door, but maybe even bigger, because this maybe needs to be more grand up here. If you're coming to an event, you don't want to feel like you're walking through a service hallway, and right now it kind of feels like that. So, you know, it's a good idea that maybe we treat this upstairs just a little bit differently, and that it gets a larger, sort of more grand entrance. Let's just see what that feels like. Yeah, because you're right. Like, there's going to be a lot of people coming in and out. And with that many people coming in and out, with that many people coming in and out, it's going to get cluttered right here. And not only that, but it's also going to be it's also just going to feel tight if like the event ends at one time and everybody leaves at the same time. It's going to be a madhouse. Actually, the other consideration is both of these this is going to need 2 exits, right? So that means 2 stairs. By code, that fire code doesn't allow elevators to be counted as exits, so it's 2 stairs. So this one's going to need a stair on this other end, and maybe that one's just dedicated here. Let me think about that. But definitely needs a bigger sort of entrance. And part of the thing too is I need to like kind of talk with my client on this, because we're calling this an event space, and given the kind of AI image that they provided me, it shows to me that it's going to be like a little kind of mini concerts, or just kind of small, quaint atmosphere. And, I've done actually a few large, like huge concert arenas before. I've done like small coffee shop stages. This is sort of in between. So what that tells me is that, if it's a portable stage, it's got music, it's got things like that, it's probably going to end at a certain time, and everybody's going to leave at the same time. Arrivals is a little bit different because people kind of arrive varying. Some people show up early, some people show up late, but usually when things end, that's when it really gets crowded. So I got to really consider the flow of everybody leaving out of the space. The one thing I don't like right now is just this harsh kind of corner eating into the space. It just feels, I don't know, feels sharp. It feels like it's bad feng shui, first off, but I don't really design to feng shui, but I don't know, it feels like it's like a weird little corner, unless I had a purpose for it. Maybe the door comes onto this side. So you open here. I don't really care for that because I don't like opening into, and first thing you see is like this back of house, and you're like, gotta like turn your head to the side to see the stage where the event is. Put it here, but then what if I just like soften it a little bit, angle the wall, and so now you walk in and you're facing the main event, and then you have your sort of pre-function event here. I think that feels a little better. Sliding doors is a good idea. However, they don't technically count for code. And for code purposes, doors need to swing in the direction of egress. There are certain exceptions to that. You can have sliding doors that have breakaway on it, so if in emergency you kind of hit it and it pushes out. But those are expensive. So typically I try to just do swinging doors when I know it's going to be an exit. And that way, from fire code standpoint, everybody can kind of just go in the direction of travel. So yeah, that feels better. Kind of walk in. There's still a pinch point here, but I'm still not sold on this being a straight stair anyways. I may end up doing a stair that kind of wraps around. So you might not end up landing right here. But just from a first impression, when you first walk in through the doors, you kind of get a sense of the space. And then there's this little like alcove, which is maybe where you hear activity going on or something like that. It kind of creates a little interest area there. I think that's better. Okay. So let's put that to the roof. So this is the exterior wall. Let's add some glass to that and see what that looks like. Which floor am I on? There we go. So this is an area where we could have sliding doors, and we could even have the product's called NanoWall. There's other other brands. That's just kind of what we refer to it as. But it's the multi-folding glass panel wall or whatever. But it's basically a big glass door that all the panels slide. That might be an area where we could do the sliding doors, and they're super expensive. But I think I've discussed this before. Is sometimes you have to just consider, if you're going to spend money, spend it in the right places, and that might be one that is considered the right place. It's also a consideration that that's probably going to be the first thing we value engineer when we start getting pricing together on this. I'd rather put it in now and kind of hope that we can afford it. And then if we have to take it out later, it doesn't kill the project, but it's an easy area where we know we can save some money. You probably have seen them on like high-end residential, things like that. Interesting thing with those too, I've put them on a few projects, and some of the things you don't consider is we have to we have to comply with energy codes. And so if we have an air conditioned space, and again, we're in Texas, so, things might be different where you are, but we have an air conditioned space in here. If somebody opens that door all the way, now you're just blowing all that air out. And what we have to do is those have to have an interlock switch. It's the same with like overhead doors, kind of like garage doors, is if they're open in a commercially used air conditioned space, the air conditioning has to shut off. So that way you're not using energy to kind of cool the neighborhood, as my dad would say. And so what happens is if we put these in, we have to consider that if the client opens it, there's now no air conditioning going on in the space because of energy codes and compliance that we need to have. So one thing that we need to make sure the owners understand is that that's something that's going to happen. And in Texas in July, not having air conditioning in the space makes it a not feasible option. So while they look really cool and it's really awesome when the weather's great, it may not be worth it in the long run because you end up losing your air conditioning whenever it's open. And on that note, I want to shorten this up because I also want to add a man door. For that note, like if this is going to be one of those big sliding doors, if you keep it closed, people should be able to go in and out without having to use that door. So I'm going to add a man door, what we call a man door. It's probably not the right term anymore, but a human-sized person door as opposed to the larger kind of sliding glass doors. All right, let's go back into Enscape and just kind of see what that feels like. I'm wondering, if somebody comes out, look here, and I'm just kind of picturing this in my head with it filled in. Bunch of the kind of bistro tables, people standing here, kind of see all the activity. That's kind of cool. I think there could be a note to close the door when the AC is put on. Yeah. You also have to like consider that a lot of times the people using the space also aren't your client, and that people just have a hard time following directions. So we try to make it as simple as possible for them to use the space properly, because you can put as many notes as you want, but end users don't always know what to do. Prime example, I have a project that I've done phase 1 and phase 2 on. They use the space as a wedding venue, and part of the discussion that we have early on design is how we can make it as simple as possible, because they have to have a full-time staff there on call during the wedding because somebody can't figure out how to turn on the lights. And so how do we make that as simple as possible without having to have like a whole owner's manual? That's something we usually provide, or not us, but the contractors usually provide the owners, like, here's a owner's manual, how everything works and all that, which is fine when it's the owner using the space or they have a maintenance person or whatever. But if you're going to have an event space and there's like so many different users in there that aren't necessarily technically savvy, how do we make it as simple as possible? And so that's why they actually made that rule, that law, that it has a switch. It's an actual like on-off contact switch that when the doors open, it has to shut the air conditioning off, because most people just wouldn't turn it off, and they would rather just spend the energy and not even think twice about it. Let me add a rail to this just to make it look right. So obviously, big opening, we need a guardrail. so you don't fall off. Guardrail pipe. And flip it so the guardrail's on the inside. Okay, cool. Okay. So now people are in here. They're kind of hanging out here. They get to see all the stuff that's going on over here. And actually, it's really cool. This building I drove by the other day, they're like a motorsports company, and I'm really into cars. And they had a Skyline sitting outside. They had a couple of Porsches. Like, that's a cool thing. If you're in this event and that tenant's still there, like you're coming outside and you're seeing all these really cool cars, like that'd be awesome. I'd spend more of my time on the balcony looking at the cars than whatever event's going on inside. But that's just me. So one thing I'm noticing, right, how bright this is here and how dark this is here. And normally that's a problem, right? Like when I was dealing with the salon space last week, that's a problem because you want even daylight throughout. However, this space being an event space where they're going to have lighting, they're going to, we actually don't want as much daylight as we would normally have, or at least we want to have controlled daylight. We want to be able to shut it down so that if it's an event going on during the day, they can have the lights working. That being said, I know my client, after having discussed with them, they're probably all their events will be at night. So something to consider. Before I get too far with the lights, let me add some skylights or some Clerestory windows to this little thing that I added here. And let's see how that kind of changes the space. Let's see, because the corridor ends here. Okay. I'm going to split it up probably into two. And I'll need an elevation. Oh man, time's flying. It's already been an hour. Sweet. And this one I'm also going to do well, let me just put this in there and see what that looks like. Will transom windows on the sides help? Yes, absolutely. The only concern I have is with these windows here is if this ends up being opposite the side with the stage, is the glare of this coming in onto the stage. But we can control it, right? We have things like roller shades and all that, but these are so high up that it's going to be difficult. So if we did have these, which I think we will, I'll definitely be adding blackout shades to it, and I'll recommend to the owner that we should have electronic ones so that push of a button, it goes down and you don't have to deal with roller chains, things like that. So just from a light perspective, it feels better. Yeah, tinting is fine. The problem with tinting, the question was about tinted windows. Tinting is fine. The only problem is like it's fixed, right? It's only going to be whatever darkness it's at always. I like the idea of being able to kind of adjust it. If you have, let's say this event space isn't for a concert and you just have like a corporate meeting or something, it's nice to kind of open it up and allow as much daylight as possible. But if you did have an event, kind of bring the shades down. With the tinting, you kind of, whatever level you choose, that's going to be the fixed level. The other thing that we could do, if money wasn't an issue, was electrochromic film. So flick of a switch, it tints it more or less. But from what I understand, it's not super cheap to do that. So probably not a consideration on this project. So one thing I'm noticing is I had this corridor for the stair, this lobby coming all the way up, and obviously that's going to cut off on the window. So a couple of thoughts on that is I could bring this wall down to a lower height and just kind of cap it. And this allows this Clerestory window to kind of let the light in. But the negative to that, the downfall is all my stair corridors need to be completely fire rated, which that reminds me, this glass, maybe too much glass. So that means if I have to fire rate, I have to fire rate the top. Is that going to be worth it to get this extra light in? So next step is to see if I made that wall lower, will the kind of strangeness of the clerestory being there be okay, or is it worth it? So let's take this, we'll detach it from here, and we'll make it 12 feet tall. And I'm not going to draw the cap in right now, but we can just imagine. So now imagine this is the entry, but it kind of has a gypsum board top on there. So pluses and minuses, feels a lot better in terms of the lighting coming in from there. Minus extra costs to do the fire rating on there. And in reality, this ends up being a trash trap and dust trap. People, I mean, they're not children, but they a lot of times act like children. They'll throw stuff up there and it just collects dust and all that. Other option is reconsider the windows, maybe only bring them shorter to here. So we have 1, 2, 3, let's just make it 4 and then mirror it on the other side. Because part of the other thing we have to consider too is, what does the building look like from the outside? That's why I did 2 kind of symmetrical. But let's see if we made this instead. And then we can put these back up and see how that looks. To the top. The other thing to consider too, like it feels like it's empty right here, but I just haven't built the walls yet for this, so that's going to kind of fill it in. How about placing it in the middle? Maybe it could mimic the wall facade angle shape. Yeah, it's not a bad idea, is maybe like angling like that. Let's try that. It's a good idea. Just one thing to also talk about is it is going to cost more to not have a basically a non-rectilinear window, but maybe the cost is worth it. Delete. What is it doing? Okay. Yeah, I like that. And it feels kind of unique and custom, right? It feels like it was built for this space. It reminds me, I recently had a project. They're actually almost done with it now. But it was a church, but the area where it was going in is kind of like known for like airports and sort of I don't know, industrial kind of stuff. So we did a design that mimicked like an airport hangar for a church. And it sort of had these sort of same sort of, look of custom windows and custom pieces that align with the building. And it kind of just makes it feel unique. So I think this would probably be worth it to do. So yeah, thanks for the idea. That's awesome. Looks a lot better too. And you'll notice there's a color difference here. That's only because this is the exterior wall and this is the interior, and I haven't set it up properly. These will probably end up being the same color, but what's funny is I actually kind of like it dual like this, where it's a different color up top because it kind of plays into that same sort of custom feel. Maybe this is just a happy little accident that will dictate the rest of the design as this becomes the feature and this sort of paint scheme lines up with it. And now I'm wondering, do I want the stage on this side, or would it be cooler on this side? because then if you're standing here, that's sort of your backdrop. Because I like that. I like the way that looks. It'd be kind of cool to look at that as opposed to having it on your back. Let me look at their plan. Yeah, because they're going to have a big presentation wall, though. LED screen, performance wall. But if it's on the opposite side of the glass, the glare from the glass is going to mess with the LED. I mean, granted, LEDs are a lot better than they used to be, or than what it used to be before LEDs, where with projection, like I used to do conference rooms where I couldn't have any windows in it because you couldn't see anything. So they actually had guests coming in and turning around and seeing the presentation, which is sort of what's kind of happening here. You come in and it's on the backside. I guess I kind of need to figure out what that presentation wall is. Are we talking just a few screens, or is it, a giant backdrop? Like when I do churches, we'll usually have like the whole wall just kind of floating, and then like there's passage where you can kind of walk behind it on the stage. I think I'm going to start with it on this side and kind of see what that feels like. Let me build these walls here just so I can get a sense of scale. And again, nothing is like precise here. This feels about right for that size. And then I'll kind of move them around as I get further in design. And I don't know if any of you are designers, or I think you are finishing school or something next door. Yeah, I don't know if this is how other people design. I've been doing it for so long. This is just the way that works for me, is real messy, come back later and fix it. Okay, so and these are just puzzle pieces. They don't make a lot of logical sense. Like this probably needs to be like that, and this will end up coming to here, whatever. Next door, 1 semester. Nice. I remember those times. It goes by fast. The fact that you made it this far, it's probably more than most. I don't know what school you go to, but the attrition rate at the schools I went to, very high. Not a lot of people finished. So congrats on that. Yeah, so you can see how it kind of definitely starts filling in the space once you have these walls. Dissertation work and stuff. Yeah, when I was doing undergrad, we had, what did we call it? Senior thesis project, something like that. Where basically it was a whole year. You kind of have one topic that you design around for the whole year. And you have advisor, things like that. Which is really cool because you kind of get to spend a whole year working on the project, and it's kind of closer to like real world work because you spend so much time on it as opposed to 16 weeks, or where I went, it was quarters. So like we had like 10 weeks to get it done. So it's closer to that, but it still doesn't have all the education you need, obviously, because there's just no clients, things like that. The closest you have is maybe your advisor. But when I did my master's degree, it was in building science, which was all research based. And that was crazy because I spent 2 years just doing research. And my thesis or dissertation ended up being like 1,000 pages of just research and data and wind tunnel studies and all that kind of stuff. And it was totally different than the design stuff, which is cool. I really enjoyed it because it's a bit different than just worrying about design. And that actually was probably closer to what I wouldn't say it's closer to what I do today because I don't really do building science stuff, but it's closer in terms of like paperwork and emails and talking to people than it is actually design. So definitely fills in the space when I put the walls in. But of course, like I said, it's awkward, right? Got these weird little like alcoves, and if this is the exit, man, that's hard to find. So how do we want to deal with that? One thing that they had too was it was all kind of behind a service corridor, kind of cleaning the space up. So maybe I want to consider like closing it off, just access through the corridor. One thing to consider too, when I was doing big concert venues, like green rooms was a big deal because you had very popular celebrity acts, and you wanted them to have private access from when they arrive into their green room onto stage and then back out again, so they're not kind of walking them through somebody else. So I kind of like this idea of having a service corridor, and maybe this ends up being the green room, which has direct access to the stage, and kind of like keeps them secluded. But by adding corridors, that also means, it's just cumbersome for people pushing carts and tables and all that kind of stuff. So we have to really think about this lightly. That's crazy. I'm out here designing for low cost housing for rural communities. Oh, very cool. Low cost housing for rural. That's definitely something that's needed. Please, where did you say the bathroom was at? Yeah, I was just thinking these two in the back would be the bathroom area. Obviously, there's a column in there. Might be an issue, but we'll kind of deal with that later. But kind of pushing it, hiding it, I guess. If this ends up being bathroom, catering kitchen, green room, storage. Yeah, I know bathrooms are super important spaces for the use of the space, but it's not something I usually want to see, but I want to know where it is. So if you're walking to the space and it's all one big open space, you kind of have to assume it's back here, and you'll make your way towards the back. And then maybe it's just like a cased opening or something. And then you kind of get into this corridor and you see the sign, okay, here's the bathroom. Walk in here, bathroom. Catering probably wants a double door. They'll be pushing big old carts and stuff. Or in fact, I don't have it loaded. Probably put what they call an Ellison door, which is like the double swinging doors you get in restaurants and stuff. And this would be cool too if this ends up, maybe this is through here. This could be their access. The caterers can come in behind the scenes while everything else is happening here, so they kind of come into this area. But then I'd want a separate entrance just for green room, maybe. I don't know. Double door for storage. How many stalls per person? I don't know yet. So I have to do the calculations just based on what the usage is. But I can show you how I'm going to do that. Right now, I just kind of have it as 2 single users. It probably ends up needing to be more than that. So we're just going to go to the IBC, International Building Code, which is what we use here. And we're going to say Chapter 10, and that's going to give us a chart. And the chart's going to say, here's the different type of uses. So if we use assembly without fixed seats, standing space 5 net. So what that means is for this square footage, each person gets 5 square feet. So now we just 2464 divided by 5. There should be, let's just round it up to 500 people in this space. So 500 people, we now go to 29 of the IBC. We find the type of use, which is assembly, nightclubs, bars, taverns, probably similar purpose as that. We got auditoriums. It's not an art gallery, not religious, not stadium. Yeah, okay, so we're going to be nightclubs, bars, so 1 per 40 male, 1 per 40 female, so let's just say we have 500, split that in half, 250 for male, 250 female, 40 per, 6.25, so that has to round up to 7, so we might end up with 7 and 7. Now, that's a lot. That's a lot of bathrooms. So that's going to take up a lot of space. One thing that my client talked about was that potentially using some of this second floor office space for some of this event space. So that might be another option, is maybe some of this function can go downstairs. I think that's going to be a bigger conversation I need to have with a client. Because if we need 7, that's going to take up, oh man, if it's over 6, then you need an ambulatory stall as well, which is a little bit wider. Another consideration is that I used 5 square feet per person for the whole event space, meaning it's standing room, but not the whole thing's going to be standing room. Because like I said, this is going to be probably like the pre-function area. And then there's going to be, let's just say like this is stage. And I'm just doing just the assembly part of it, because that's going to be the bigger number. There will be some occupants on the stage, some for this, but let's just say now that's 1447. 1447 divided by 5, 289 divided by 2, 144, 145 divided by 40. So now we're at 4 of each, which is a little more reasonable. So yeah, we may end up having to take up a little bit more room on here. Good call asking about that, because that does make a big difference. So let's see. 3,800. They wanted the main room 3,800 to 4,000. So we're at 2,000. If you count that 2,400. So we're definitely not hitting the targets. But they weren't, the 3,800 to 4,000 wasn't like it had to be that number. They wanted to fit that amount of people in that size. So perhaps when we actually lay it out, they'll be okay with less. But again, with everything, like this is just a starting point so we can have the conversation, because when we started, this was literally an empty space. So having something to start with is usually the main goal of this. I don't know the answers necessarily, but I know how to get there if we ask the right questions. I'm just building the stage right now. Where is it? Yeah, I want to move this wall back so that it's symmetrical to that. I'm not like a hardcore everything has to be symmetrical, but when it makes sense, you should do that. Okay. Attach it. Might as well attach that one. Okay. Feels better. That said it was centered, but it doesn't look centered. Okay. Now I'm wondering if I could better utilize this space. It's kind of dead space. Not a lot of people will be hanging out like right here. If you're waiting for somebody, maybe, they went to the bathroom, you might be waiting here. You can still see the stage. That's kind of cool. But I don't think a lot of people use this space. So one thing that they had in here that I need to consider is the AV control booth, and maybe that's a good spot for it. Dang, Revit's definitely cool software. The way you're just moving around, the interface looks intriguing. Yeah. I actually, sometimes I don't know what it is. officially, but like I actually get sick, nauseous when I do Revit because I tend to go too fast. Like if I play first person shooter video games, I get sick. I can't play any of those because something with my eyes not working with my brain or whatever. So I notice when I've been working all day in Revit, I'm like, doing this kind of stuff all day long. I'll feel like crap later on in the day. So yeah, it's really cool. And sometimes I have to remind myself just to slow down because I'm going to get sick later if I don't. If I move this, it gives me more room here, but that also means, well, this may not even be the configuration anyways, because I have to add more bathrooms. What I was thinking is that you could see through here, you could see the door. I like having the opening to this sort of offset from the door so that it's not like a straight shot. You see it first thing you walk in. But like I said, if I have to have 7 or 4 and 4, 8 bathrooms, that may be a different configuration anyways. One thing to think about too is I don't know if this is a good spot for the AV because they need to have visual eyesight to the stage typically. So what I had as the green room may end up having to be the AV wing area. So maybe this becomes AV, this becomes green room. Catering moves over here. And catering really didn't need to be this big anyways. And catering moves here, and what if they also have a roll-up kind of window to serve with a little countertop so they don't have to come out? And that would kind of make it so it's more convenient for them to just kind of serve. If you have an event going on and you got guests and people coming up picking trays and stuff, having to come back here and do this is a lot more difficult than just going through an opening right here. So this maybe becomes green room, and then this becomes, well, I'm going to need some building storage, but this might end up being the actual size of the bathrooms at the end of the day. So bathrooms, green room, AV, catering. I don't want to keep eating into the space for storage, but if this is going to be dead space anyways, storage. But then what it creates is this little hallway. It is kind of weird too, this kind of floating area. I think that place that looks dead. Maybe there could be cabinets or a shelf. Yeah, we definitely need some storage. And maybe instead of a wall, it's like a built-in. I'm a big believer that you can never have enough storage. However, in this case, they have this giant warehouse that they're actually going to be storing most of their stuff in, and this isn't functioning without this existing. So I would argue we don't need as much storage as we think we do, or at least I think I do, only because a lot of it's going to be down here in this giant warehouse. This door doesn't need to be here. Oh, actually it does, if that's the green room. Yeah. And then there'll be an AV booth here. Feels better. It's not like this big cavernous valley that you're walking through. And then, like you said, what if that wasn't even there? Actually, if I end up putting the pass-through window here, maybe the cabinets and counters actually a good spot because you can, have stuff here. You could also have stuff here. And this becomes sort of the food area where you come and get your food. And it gives you a lot of options to kind of store things. That might work. Oh, AV booth. Questions. What's an AV booth? So like as the concert's going on, you have like your sound engineer or the person controlling lights or the TV screen or whatever. So it's just kind of the person either on the side or in the back that's watching the presentation or the concert, and they're just kind of controlling audio levels and lighting and all that stuff. AV is audio visual. So I do a lot of churches too, and a lot of times they'll have it in the back so that the person on stage can kind of get visual cues, things like that. Or if there's like presenters and stuff, they would have actually like a clock. Or what's interesting is they'll have what sometimes is called a confidence monitor. So it's actually a TV screen on the back wall that the person presenting can look at and see themselves presenting. And that actually helps them feel more confident that what everybody else is seeing is appropriate, or, they look good or whatever. So they have actually a monitor facing the stage so that they could see what's going on. That's how they typically do it in churches. In like big concert venues like I've done before, like it's out in the middle of the lawn area, kind of in the middle, and it's close enough to where they could see the stage. They could run all their cables, but they can control it. And then sometimes they want it on the side so that it's sort of out of the way. Because of this area, there's not that much room. We don't want to put it back here and take up all the space. So kind of putting it on the side makes sense there. But yeah, good question. And that's the other thing too, I think you'll learn, you probably already know, is we end up having our own language in architecture in general, but especially when you get specific. So, things like back of house or AV, MEP, IT, all these different acronyms we use. A lot of the rest of the world doesn't know what those are. So we have to kind of like remember when we're meeting with clients that a lot of times they might not know what we mean when we say something. So I try to like put myself in their perspective when I'm meeting with them, just to make sure I'm not overly dense with my words or like acronyms or something that, makes sense to me but doesn't make sense to them. And I think that goes a long way. I've kind of gotten feedback from clients over the years, just how they like the fact that I can kind of simply explain things to them, and I never treat them like they're dumb for not knowing, because like I said, they haven't gone to school. They don't know a lot of these things that we terms we use. So I try to kind of have empathy for them, that I may say these words all the time, but they don't know what they mean. One thing that really bugs me about Revit, and it's probably something I need to set up in my defaults, is whenever I add a countertop, it comes in as bright orange. But it's also good because it reminds me I need to actually make the correct material later, but it's like jarring when I first see it. I kind of like that idea of like serving window here, setup counter here, because when you have these events, a lot of times I'll bring in like portable folding tables, but sometimes you want to have like a nicer kind of finished built-in area. And kind of makes good use of that space too. All right. And this concrete has really been bugging me. This is the Revit default concrete. It just bugs me. So I'm going to change it to the Enscape one, or the one I've made for Enscape. Okay, that feels a little better. Also, bugs me in Revit, and if you guys know how to fix this, this would be great. The default for doors, the Revit doors, is to have a masonry frame and to be inset 1 inch. And I don't know, maybe I haven't looked at it close enough to fix it. But you see how it like sticks out like that? It's really annoying because it defaults here masonry inset 1 inch. I have to change that to 0. And so then that pushes it kind of flush with the wall. And then what masonry frame is like normally this is like a 2-inch frame all the way around if it's going in drywall. But based on the height of the door, if you're doing masonry, you don't want to have to cut the block because the dimensions don't add up. So you add a 4-inch head on there for when it's going into masonry. And for some reason, Revit defaults to that, but I don't do a ton of masonry projects. So now I have to go through every time and turn it to non-masonry, and it makes a normal size frame. Like I said, I'm sure there's a setting for that to default it in Revit, but one of those little annoyances that I forget about by the time I'm done designing, and I never go back and change the standards. Okay, so what do we got? We got entry, walk in, kind of pre-meeting area, stage, cool window feature, catering area, bathrooms, green room that's private, plus a kind of serving area, room for the AV. I think we're getting there, at least from a layout perspective. We got most of the rooms to fit. It feels about right for the size of the space that it is. It has plenty of daylight kind of coming through for when you want the daylight in there. It's not like super cavernous and dark. Back of house is just, that's it, back of house. Problem. We need that second exit, so we need a way for them to get from this space to the exit. Because I kind of wanted this to be a private entrance for the green room, but by code, they're going to need a second exit. And by code, you're not allowed to exit through intervening spaces, which means if it's not like a vestibule or a hallway, you can't go through another space to get to an exit. So if this becomes a green room, you can't walk through the green room to get to where I'm planning on putting the stairs out here. So this ends up having to be connection vestibule here, which makes this green room tiny. Wait, what size did they have? 2 couches. So they had 2 couches and some kind of table or something. Let's see. Let's add some couches and just see. Sofas. I don't need like super luxurious couches, but just enough. You know, a lot of times it's for the acts. They get there earlier and they're kind of waiting for the show to start and need a place to go, kind of chill out before the show starts. Okay, so we got a couple of couches. Oops. Move this here. So that's how much room they really need. Something like that. If this is the bathrooms, I can't really take out of there. I don't really want to cut into the retail to add a exit here. Here's a thought. What if the exit isn't through here, because that's kind of weird with this is 2-story, is they have a dedicated stair out the warehouse. And I'll probably end up coming down and turning, and then I can rate that wall, and it has a door straight to the outside, so it doesn't actually connect to the warehouse. Or maybe it could connect to the warehouse if they're bringing stuff in and out, and this becomes sort of like the access to the warehouse plus the exterior exit. They come down this way and they're straight out, and then that also becomes the catering entrance. So now they're not having to go around things, and then this becomes all green room. I think that works better, keeping this sort of as the keeping this as the sort of connection point. So I want to go from slab to this one. Ooh, that's a lot of stairs, because this is now going 3 stories. Let's just see how much that takes up. Yeah, I think I can live with that though. It does take up a bit of space, but if that's how much space I'm going to need anyways, I'd rather take it out of the warehouse than the event space. And then now, yeah, that kind of creates separate entrances for everybody. Back of house comes through here. I think I might need 3 landings instead of just 2. Hopefully it won't bug in for the warehouse space. Yeah, I've talked to the client a bit about the warehouse space. They had already talked about the freight elevator kind of taking up the warehouse space. And they're not fixed on this size necessarily. They want it as big as possible, but given the height that we have, they're going to be raising it higher. And it's really weird to talk about nowadays, but I guess it's not that weird, but they're looking into different like automation type of systems, like picker type systems like Amazon has, to where your aisles are now thinner, you go taller, and you don't need as much floor space as possible. So I think this might be not as big a deal if I took up some warehouse space for this, because I think having the event space bigger is better than having a smaller, than having a bigger warehouse space. Obviously, I got to clean that up, but the idea is there. Okay. Well, this is looking good for what I wanted to achieve today. I do have some cleanup to do, obviously, but I got a general good idea of what the layout's going to be. I was able to sort of resolve this issue. I got to fix the stairs. Had a cool little feature added there, so that's going to look good. So yeah, I think I got to get ready for my next meeting, but I think I got some pretty good progress here today. I think we achieved what I wanted to achieve at this point. I'm going to jump back on this tomorrow after my meeting, kind of clean it up, and I don't have a meeting again with him till next week, so I got some time to kind of pretty it up. So that's going to do it, I think, for today's live stream. Kind of hang out for just a minute or so, and if you guys have any last minute questions, otherwise appreciate y'all hanging out with me while I go through this. Video coming out Thursday. What's this one? Oh, this is about starter homes. And I don't know, you guys probably have the age to where you'd be considering starter homes. Something to definitely think about, that they kind of aren't around anymore. But I'll leave you to kind of check out that video when it comes out on Thursday. Good luck with your next meeting. Yeah, thanks a lot, Nextdoor. It's good having you here, hanging out with me. So thanks for all the good ideas, and we'll see y'all next week.